The morning sun spilled through the crystal windows of the Imperial Grand Hotel, its golden light gliding across polished marble floors and glittering chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls above the main conference hall. The staff rushed in quiet synchronization, preparing for one of the most anticipated corporate events of the year, the Global Business Alliance Summit, where billion-dollar partnerships were forged with handshakes and smiles that could reshape industries overnight. Among the swirl of executives, assistants, and waiters in crisp uniforms, no one noticed a young girl in plain black shoes carrying a tray of coffee cups. Her name was Lila, the maid's daughter. At only 16, she was helping her mother, Elena, who had worked at the Imperial for nearly a decade. Lila wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the executive floor, but her mother had asked her to help deliver refreshments for the morning session. The girl's wide eyes took in everything, the tall men in suits, the women in elegant business dresses, and the screens displaying the name of the keynote guest, Mr. Aaron Keller, founder of Keller Tech Global. Whispers followed the name wherever it appeared. Everyone knew him, the man who built an empire from a single patent, worth billions. But what most didn't know, and what the staff had been quietly warned about, was that Aaron Keller was deaf. He arrived precisely at 9. A sleek black limousine pulled up to the main entrance, and 2 assistants stepped out, scanning the surroundings before opening the door for him. Aaron emerged, tall, composed, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, though they rarely met anyone's gaze directly. He wore a dark tailored suit and carried a small black tablet that translated speech into text for him. The hotel manager, a polished man named Mr. Langston, stepped forward with a forced smile, speaking too fast and too loud as if volume could pierce silence. "Welcome, Mr. Keller. We are honored to have you here. Please, this way." Aaron watched his lips, nodded curtly, and followed, his calmness intimidating everyone in his path. As they moved through the lobby, some executives whispered behind him, "Does he really make billion-dollar deals without speaking? I heard his company uses AI to read emotions. Ironic, isn't it? Imagine being that rich and not hearing your own success." The words floated like poison, and yet Aaron's expression never changed. He had long learned that silence could be a weapon sharper than words. Upstairs, in the grand ballroom, the guests gathered, CEOs, investors, and media figures, all dressed in ambition. They spoke in circles of power, waiting for the presentations to begin. Lila followed her mother through a side door, carrying a tray toward the refreshment table. She caught sight of Aaron standing near the stage, glancing over a digital screen where his interpreter typed the host's words in real time. But the interpreter, a young man in a gray vest, looked nervous, fumbling with his device as the system glitched, freezing mid-sentence. Aaron tapped the screen twice, waiting. Nothing. The interpreter's face reddened. I'm sorry, sir. It's not responding," he stammered, forgetting that Aaron couldn't hear him. Panic flickered in the air. The host, oblivious, continued his booming introduction about the importance of clear communication in modern leadership, irony dripping from every syllable. Aaron looked around, reading lips, but the flurry of overlapping conversations and half-turned faces made it impossible. He clenched his jaw. In a hall full of people who prided themselves on connection, he was utterly isolated. The investors watched awkwardly, not knowing whether to wait or proceed. Someone whispered, "Should we just skip his part?" Another said, "He can't present without his interpreter anyway." Mr. Langston, sweating, stepped up to stall, rambling about logistics. The tension was thick enough to choke on. And then, from behind the service table, a soft movement caught Aaron's eye, a girl, barely more than a child, her dark curls tucked behind her ears, setting down a tray. She had stopped mid-motion, her gaze fixed on him wide with something that wasn't pity. She lifted her hands, hesitant at first, and began to sign. Aaron blinked, stunned. The shapes her fingers traced were fluent, natural, alive. "Do you need help?" She signed, slowly but clearly. The air seemed to still. The interpreter froze. The host fell silent mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the maid's daughter signing across the grand hall to the billionaire who everyone else had just ignored. Aaron's stern composure cracked, just a flicker of surprise, then something like relief. He nodded once, signing back. "Yes. The device isn't working. You know ASL." She smiled, her hands moving gracefully. "My mom taught me. We learned because my cousin is deaf." Her mother, frozen beside her, mouthed her name in panic, Lila. But it was too late. The entire room was watching. The girl walked forward slowly, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who didn't belong there but refused to be invisible. Aaron gestured to his notes, and she quickly interpreted, her movements fluid and precise. Within seconds, she bridged what technology had failed to do. Words that would have been lost came alive through her fingers. The executives exchanged looks, confusion, curiosity, disbelief. But as Aaron continued, something extraordinary happened. His words, translated through Lila's hands, began to captivate the audience. He spoke about building connections beyond sound, about how true communication transcends what ears can hear. Lila conveyed not just his signs, but his conviction, his warmth, his humor. The room leaned in. When he paused, she signed his last words with such quiet power that even those who had mocked him before sat in awe. By the time the applause erupted, it wasn't just for Aaron. It was for the girl who had turned a moment of embarrassment into one of brilliance. She stood beside him, cheeks flushed, her mother trembling in disbelief. Aaron signed thank you and smiled, a small, genuine smile that carried more weight than 1,000 speeches. And though no one knew it yet, that simple exchange, between a billionaire who lived in silence and a maid's daughter who spoke his language, would set off a chain of events that would change both of their lives, and close one of the most unexpected billion-dollar deals in history. The applause still rang in Lila's head long after the guests had dispersed for lunch. She stood near the service corridor, tray pressed to her chest, feeling the echo of the moment that had just unfolded. Her mother, Elena, gripped her arm, whispering harshly, "Lila, what were you thinking? You can't just walk into that room and," but her voice broke before she could finish. Beneath the scolding was pride she could not hide. "You saved that man from humiliation," she murmured finally, eyes glistening. "But child, people like him don't remember girls like us." Lila didn't answer. She was still seeing the way Aaron Keller had looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her. It was a look that said he had truly seen her, the way no one else in that hall ever had. Back in the ballroom, the investors buzzed like bees around Aaron. The billionaire remained calm, answering questions on his tablet as his assistants translated his typed replies onto nearby screens. But his eyes occasionally drifted toward the hallway where Lila had disappeared. He had met hundreds of interpreters, all trained professionals, but none had captured the rhythm of his thoughts like that girl. There was sincerity in her movements, not performance, but understanding. And that, he knew, was rare. Later that afternoon, as the summit resumed, a sudden commotion rippled through the staff. The hotel manager, Mr. Langston, came bustling into the service area, his polished shoes clicking sharply. "Where is the young woman from this morning?" "The one who," gestured to Mr. Keller. Elena froze mid-wipe of a coffee pot. "She's my daughter, sir." "Is there a problem?" Langston's face twitched, the kind of smile used to hide panic. "Not a problem," he said quickly. "Mr. Keller has requested her presence. Personally." Every maid in the room went still. Elena's cloth fell from her hand. "He what?" "He wants to see her. Now." Moments later, Lila was escorted back into the grand hall, her uniform freshly pressed, her heart pounding so loudly she could almost hear it. Aaron stood near the stage again, flanked by two advisors. When he saw her, his stern face softened. He signed slowly, his gestures deliberate so everyone could follow. "You sign beautifully. Thank you for helping me this morning." Lila smiled nervously and signed back, "You're welcome, sir. I'm glad I could help." One of his aides spoke for him aloud, translating as the executives nearby watched. Then, Aaron signed again, faster this time. "Would you help me once more? The next session is critical, a negotiation. I trust you more than a broken device." Lila's breath caught. "Me," she mouthed. She looked at her mother, who stood at the back, trembling. Aaron nodded. "You." The next session was closed door, limited to investors and company representatives. The guards hesitated at first, but Aaron's firm nod silenced all objections. Inside, the mood was sharper, colder. This was no presentation, it was a battle of billionaires, where a single mistranslated phrase could tilt power. Lila sat beside Aaron, notebook in hand, while his aides watched uneasily. The opposing party, a group from Japan's Keishin Enterprises, glanced at her curiously. She was clearly no professional interpreter. One of them whispered, "Is this some kind of joke?" But when the meeting began, doubts faded. Aaron signed his ideas with precision, and Lila mirrored him faithfully. Every flick of her fingers, every tilt of her head carried weight. She conveyed not just his meaning but his intent, the conviction behind the silence. When Keishin's CEO, Mr. Hirano, spoke through his own translator, Lila kept her eyes locked on him, catching the subtle shifts in tone that even his words couldn't mask. Once, when his translator softened a phrase that had been slightly dismissive, Aaron raised a brow. Lila caught it immediately and signed quietly. He said, "If your company can deliver, not when. He doubts your capability." Aaron smiled faintly, typed a message, and within seconds his screen displayed, "We've delivered innovation where others delivered excuses." The translator read it aloud, and the room tensed. What followed was a dance of intellect and intuition. Lila was no executive, yet she understood empathy, the current beneath every deal. When the conversation drifted toward artificial intelligence and emotion recognition software, she found herself unexpectedly engaged. Aaron signed about the importance of accessibility technology. Lila's hands expressed it with such warmth that even Mr. Hirano seemed moved. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "Keller Tech sees what others do not." Aaron nodded, eyes glinting, and signed back, "We hear the world differently, and sometimes better." By the end of the 2-hour meeting, the energy in the room had transformed. What began as skepticism ended with genuine respect. The Keishin delegates stood and bowed lightly. Mr. Hirano extended his hand. "We will proceed," his translator said. "Your proposal honors both innovation and humanity." As they left, Aaron turned to Lila, signing one word, "Brilliant." She flushed, unable to hide her smile. Outside the hall, the whispers began again, but this time they were different. "Who is that girl?" "The maid's daughter. She saved the deal." News traveled faster than the elevators. By evening, everyone at the Imperial Grand knew about the young interpreter who had stepped in for a billionaire and turned skepticism into partnership. That night, as the chandeliers dimmed and the guests retired, Elena found her daughter sitting by the window of the service quarters, staring at the skyline. "You were incredible," she said softly. "I was terrified, but you," she shook her head, smiling through tears. "You changed something in there." Lila shrugged. "I just listened, with my hands." Neither of them saw Aaron Keller standing in the hallway beyond, watching quietly. He couldn't hear their voices, but he understood the shape of gratitude in their faces. For the first time in years, he felt something stir, not pity or admiration, but possibility. He took out his tablet, typed a single note for his aide, "Find out everything about her education. I have an idea." The next morning dawned clear and silver over the city, the kind of crisp light that makes glass towers look like blades. Down in the service wing, the smell of polish and coffee clung to the air as Elena tied her apron for another long shift. Lila was beside her, unusually quiet, replaying the previous day's meeting in her head like a dream she was afraid to wake from. She could still feel the pulse of the boardroom, the heat of so many eyes on her hands. Every sign, every breath had carried a meaning larger than herself. But she was still the maid's daughter, she reminded herself. Yesterday must have been a miracle that would fade by lunchtime. A sharp knock broke her thoughts. Mr. Langston stood at the door with a sealed envelope in hand. "Miss Lila Morales?" he asked, his voice almost ceremonial. The staff turned to look. He never called her by name. "Mr. Keller requests your presence in the executive suite." Immediately. The envelope bore Keller Tech's sleek emblem, a silver K that caught the light. Inside was a single card printed in minimalist black. "Your interpretation yesterday was exceptional. I would like to discuss an opportunity." A.K. Elena's hand fluttered to her chest. An opportunity? What kind of opportunity? But Lila barely heard her. Her heart thudded as she followed the manager through the carpeted corridors to the top floor, where the air itself seemed quieter, thicker with power. When the elevator doors opened, Aaron Keller was waiting. No aides, no entourage, just him, standing by the panoramic window with the morning sun painting his suit in gold. He turned as she entered and signed a greeting so smooth it felt rehearsed. "Good morning, Lila." She replied shyly, "Good morning, sir." He gestured for her to sit. I meant what I said yesterday, he signed. You have a gift. Not just in language, in connection. I need someone like that on my team. Her eyes widened. Me. I'm not trained, Mr. Keller. I'm just, you listen with more than ears, he interrupted gently. That cannot be taught. He slid a document across the glass table, an internship offer with Keller Tech's Communication Research Division. You'd work with our accessibility engineers, his assistant voiced aloud. If you agree, we can start arrangements this week. Lila stared at the paper. Her mind filled with images, her mother scrubbing floors, the long nights counting coins, the distant dreams of college. I don't know if I can. Erin studied her expression, then signed slowly, the world won't open doors for you. Sometimes you have to knock until it listens. Something in those words lodged deep inside her. She nodded, half-dazed. I'll do it. When she returned downstairs, the service staff buzzed like startled bees. Elena looked at her daughter's face and knew before she spoke. You said yes, she whispered. Lila nodded. Then everything changes now, her mother murmured, half in pride, half in fear. Within days, Keller Tech's black sedan was waiting outside their small apartment. Lila's internship began in the company's glass and steel headquarters, where corridors hummed with innovation and silent screens tracked projects across the world. Erin watched her introduction from his office, hands folded. Around him, executives debated mergers and algorithms, but his focus was on the young woman whose courage had redefined a summit. What none of them knew was that the partnership she'd helped rescue with Cation was only the beginning, a seed of a billion-dollar alliance that would soon hinge on trust, empathy, and the quiet power of a girl who spoke in signs. 3 weeks later, the city was already whispering about the impossible deal Keller Tech had struck. Financial papers called it the new bridge between East and West, analysts called it the empathy merger, but inside Keller Tech's headquarters, the man behind it all was still the quietest presence in the building. Erin Keller's office was a glass-walled space high above the skyline, a world of silence and concentration broken only by the flicker of data on digital screens. Across the room, Lila sat with her tablet, eyes darting between lines of code and her own notes in sign shorthand. She'd spent days learning the basics of Keller Tech's emotion recognition software, a system that used microexpressions to help hearing-impaired users understand tone and intent. This part, she told one of the engineers in writing, feels like teaching machines empathy. The men had smiled. That's exactly what the boss says. Every afternoon, Erin joined the development team, moving silently among them, signing instructions or typing them into the communal board. Lila's presence had shifted the rhythm of those sessions, her translation carried warmth where algorithms lacked it. Sometimes, when the team stumbled, she'd pause and sign to Erin privately, they understand the words but not the feeling. He would nod, adjust a line of code, and the model would suddenly make sense. Word spread quickly, the maid's daughter had become the company's pulse. Yet not everyone approved. One evening, as Lila packed up her notebook, she overheard 2 executives whispering near the elevator. She's just a symbol, one muttered. Keller wants a PR story, compassion and diversity, the whole package. The other chuckled. He'll tire of her soon enough. You think a billionaire needs a teenager to translate feelings? The word stung, but she forced herself to keep walking. She'd learned from Erin that silence, when held with dignity, could be louder than argument. That night, she stayed late in the lab, finishing a prototype presentation for the upcoming investor showcase, a real test of the Cation partnership. The system had to interpret emotional cues live, bridging voice and sign into seamless translation. When Erin entered unexpectedly, she nearly dropped her stylus. He looked at the glowing screen and then at her. You built this. He signed. She nodded shyly. Almost. It still confuses sarcasm with kindness. He smiled, a rare, soft curve of his mouth. So do people. They worked side by side until the city lights flickered awake below them. For the first time, Erin shared pieces of his story, how he'd lost his hearing at 12 after an illness, how his parents had pushed him into engineering because machines didn't judge silence. Lila listened, her hands moving gently, and now you're teaching machines to listen back. He paused, then signed, maybe you are. When the day of the showcase arrived, the world came to watch. Reporters, investors, competitors, all crammed into the glass auditorium where Kellertech would unveil its breakthrough. The mayor was there, and so was Mr. Hirano from Keishin. Cameras flashed, and the hum of anticipation felt electric. Lila waited backstage, hands trembling. Aaron stood beside her, calm as a statue. "You nervous?" He signed. "A little." "Good," he replied. "That means you care." When the lights dimmed and the logo glowed on the massive screen, Aaron walked on stage to thunderous applause. He greeted the audience with his hands, his signs magnified on the display. The system translated instantly, not robotic voice, but a warm human tone modulated by the AI. "Good morning," it said. "Today we show you how technology can speak the language of emotion." The crowd leaned forward. As he spoke in signs, Lila managed the demo feed, ensuring every nuance translated correctly. Then came the test, spontaneous conversation with an investor chosen at random. The AI would read tone and body language while Lila monitored. Halfway through, a glitch hit. The translation froze mid-sentence. The hall filled with murmurs. Aaron looked at Lila, she looked back, heart hammering. Without thinking, she stepped forward, placed her tablet aside, and began signing the rest herself, live, matching his rhythm perfectly. The big screen followed her hands, fluid, graceful, human. The investors fell silent as the two of them conversed entirely through sign, yet every viewer could feel the meaning, trust, patience, understanding. When the final line appeared, "Connection needs no sound." The audience rose to its feet. Applause roared through the hall, echoing even into the corridors where staff stopped to listen. Aaron bowed slightly, then gestured to Lila beside him. The cameras flashed again, capturing the image that would appear on news feeds worldwide, the billionaire and the maid's daughter signing together beneath the words, $1 billion in empathy. That evening, as the city glittered with celebration, Aaron sent her a message that appeared on her phone, "Tomorrow, we sign the official partnership. I want you at the table." She stared at the screen, breath caught between disbelief and wonder. From ignored maid to interpreter, from interpreter to partner in the deal that would change everything, her journey was only beginning. Morning light spilled across the Kellertech tower like molten gold, reflecting off glass so high it seemed to cut the clouds. Inside, the boardroom was a world apart, gleaming table, digital walls alive with graphs, and two flags placed side by side, Kellertech and Keishin Enterprises. The partnership signing was set for 10 a.m., a ceremony that would seal one of the largest technology alliances of the decade. Outside the door, Lila stood adjusting her blazer, a simple navy one Aaron's assistant had found for her that morning. Her hands shook, not from fear but disbelief. Just weeks ago she'd been carrying trays, now she was about to interpret the final negotiations of a billion-dollar deal. Aaron arrived quietly, tablet under his arm, his expression calm but eyes bright with something that looked almost like pride. "You ready?" He signed. Lila took a steadying breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." He smiled. "Then let's make history." Inside, cameras flashed as dignitaries, investors, and journalists filled every seat. Mr. Hirano from Keishin stood at the far end, flanked by his advisors. When he saw Lila beside Aaron, he gave a respectful nod. He remembered the girl who'd transformed their first meeting. The moderators spoke into microphones, the translators whispered into earpieces, but when Aaron began signing his welcome, the room fell utterly silent. His words, voiced softly through the AI and Lila's hands, spoke of unity, how technology could bridge silence, culture, and distance. It wasn't business language, it was human. Cameras zoomed in as Lila's fingers moved like living poetry. Then came the final hurdle, the financial clause that would decide control of the shared patent. Keishin's legal chief hesitated, raising a question about data ownership. For a heartbeat the air stiffened. This was the kind of moment that could derail years of work. Aaron leaned back, eyes narrowing in thought. Lila watched him, then signed softly, "They're afraid of losing identity in partnership. Show them respect, not dominance." He looked at her for a long second, then turned to the delegates and signed again, slower, deliberate. "We do not own innovation. We share it so that no voice, no silence, is left behind." The translator repeated his words aloud, but it was Lila's movement that carried the emotion. Mr. Hirano rose, bowed deeply, and said, "Then we are honored to share this future." Applause thundered as pens met paper. Flashbulbs burst. The contract was done, a billion-dollar merger born from trust and empathy. Aaron turned toward Lila, signed one word, together, and extended his hand. She shook it, eyes shining. That evening, the city skyline blazed with the news. Reporters replayed the clip of the billionaire and the young interpreter again and again, calling it the silent deal that spoke to the world. At home, Elena watched from their tiny living room sofa, tears rolling freely. "That's my girl," she whispered. Later, on the tower's rooftop terrace, Lila found Aaron watching the city lights. He signed without turning. "You changed how they see me. How they see silence." She smiled. "You gave me the chance." For a while they stood in quiet, the wind rustling through the glass railing. Then he signed, "There's something louder than sound. It's understanding." When she left that night, the streets below shimmered with rain, and every billboard carried her image beside Kellerteka's motto, "Connection needs no sound." She knew life would never return to what it had been, but she also knew that the world now spoke a little more softly, listened a little more closely. If this story touched you, subscribe for more tales.